Shalom and welcome to a video presentation on the laws of Pesach amongst a series of other very important rabbanim speaking about and sharing insights and wisdom from the works of the rabbis of Rhodes. Today I'd like to share an excerpt from the book Moshe Yidaber, authored by Rabbi Moshe Yisrael. Rabbi Moshe Yisrael was born in the year 1748 and passed away in the year 1781, very young at age 35 years old when he passed away. Yet he was very prolific. He was a rabbi in Rhodes, a leader in Rhodes, and a bet din in the court in Rhodes, and he was considered to be a wise sage with such deep insights that was taken away in such really in the greatest years of his life due to a very, very bad illness, and he is buried in the island of Rhodes. His father outlived him. His father at the same time was already a rabbi in Alexandria, and he also had 2 sons and 3 daughters. One of his sons is Rabbi Yisrael, and out of the Israel dynasty, the family, many generations of rabbanim in the islands of Rhodes and abroad, coming out of that island into other places such as Egypt and Israel and so on. The last Rabbi Reuven Eliyahu Israel that served and led the Jews of Rhodes until 1932. And so in this book, we're going to speak about today, page Nun Hey 55, Siman Yud, about what we call in Ladino Shabbat de dos panes, which is a Shabbat of 2 breads. What is that Shabbat? It's a Shabbat that falls out on the eve of Pesach. So the day right before Pesach starts, it happens to be a Shabbat, so we have an issue. What's the issue? The issue is, how are you going to have bread for your meals of Shabbat? Because there's a restriction that is brought down in the Jerusalem Talmud and the Yerushalmi. The restriction is, a person may not have chametz on Pesach, that we know from the end of the 4th hour. You cannot have chametz on Pesach. It's our sages have made that, inhibited that, a isur, a transgression. You also, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi, you can also not have matzah on the eve of Pesach because it's about to be allowed. We're allowed to have it just in a few hours in the evening, and so in the eve of Pesach, you're not allowed to have matzah. Even though there's more than one opinion as to when that restriction begins, the vast majority of halachic authorities agree that you cannot have matzah on that day. And so the Torah in Siman 471, Taf Ayin Aleph, brings this restriction, and he says you can't have bread, you can't have matzah on the eve of Pesach. He makes a suggestion, what can you have? You can have matzah ashira. Matzah ashira comes in either the form of a sweet matzah or an egg matzah. What you know today, that's what you may have on the eve of Pesach according to the Torah. Now, by the way, for you and I to know that it's not so simple to say hamotzi on sweet matzah, and you're going to have quite a large amount, about 216 grams. You can speak to your local rabbi or reach out with any questions. Now, the book Moshe Yidaber, authored by Rabbi Moshe Yisrael that we're dealing with, brings the book called Bet David. Who's Bet David? The Bet David is a book from a rabbi in Saloniki that preceded, or just about the time, or just a little bit before the time of Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, and he writes over there, based on the Torah that we just mentioned, that makes a suggestion, since I can't have bread, I can't have matzah, I should only have sweet matzah. He says, look, he suggested only to have sweet matzah. That means you may not have cooked matzah or fried matzah. Now, in this segment of halakha, this discussion right here, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael wants to vouch for and wants to promote that we may eat cooked matzah on the eve of Pesach. Now, why would you think that you cannot have a cooked matzah on the eve of Pesach? Well, maybe with the theoretical idea that since I cannot have matzah on the day of the eve of Pesach, so cooked matzah I may also not have on the day of the eve of Pesach. Well, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, first of all, looks at what the rabbis that oppose the idea, such as the Bet David. He opposes the idea, and the Bet David says, you know why you cannot have baked or cooked matzah on the eve of Pesach? He brings an excerpt from the Gemara, from the Talmud, in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Tractate Avodah Zarah, Chavtet Amud Bet 29b, and he says over there, that we are not allowed to have wine that has been served in monasteries, wine that is owned by people that are not Jewish, and that is an enactment. We're not allowed to have that type of wine. We're also not allowed to have, and now what happens if that wine turns sour? It became chamutz, it turned into vinegar, it turned sour. You know what? You still may not have it. Why? Because since you had the original prohibition on that wine, it sticks to it to such a degree that it could no longer be detached from it. It is prohibited without any sense of relief. You cannot let go of that prohibition whatsoever. Furthermore, if you want to somehow try something unique and take this wine that you may not drink because it was served in a monastery or owned by somebody that's not Jewish, we're not allowed to have it. What if you want to do something else? You say, you know what? Let me manipulate the wine. I could cook the wine. I'll take the wine and I'll cook it. And once you cook it or pasteurize it, it kind of decreases in value, decreases in significance, and maybe in such a fashion I'll be able to then have that wine. The Gemara itself says you're not allowed to have that wine, even if you change it. Now let's hold ourselves together here. The Rabbi David says, you see, the Gemara says even if you change the wine's not allowed, and you change the wine, you took it from regular wine, now it's pasteurized wine. Or you took it from wine and on its own it became sour, it became like vinegar wine, it's not called wine anymore, it's still not allowed. Says Rabbi David, so too matzah. You're not allowed to eat matzah on the eve of Pesach? Even if you take the matzah and manipulate it by cooking it or frying it, you can't eat it. Says the Rabbi Moshe Yisrael. Rabbi Moshe Yisrael wants to say something else. He says, you know what? What did you say? You said that the prohibition is still there and the prohibition cannot leave it. Said Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, you know what? It really is not always relevant. That's not pertinent. You can't say that across the board because there are exceptions to the case. And so the Rabbi Moshe Yidaber really takes a look at this statement that says, Isur shebo leheichan lecha azil, which is, in the earlier idea, we said that once something is not allowed, there is a prohibition that is there on the subject, on the item, and it cannot just vanish. But argues Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, he says, well, sometimes we can say that. It really depends on the intent when the sages, or even a person, places a prohibition on an item. And he brings a case from the Talmud in Masechet Nedarim, page Nun Bet, Amud Bet, 52b. And he says over there that when a person makes a vow not to have grapes or not to have olives, he says he doesn't want to eat grapes, he doesn't want to eat olives, he makes a vow, he makes a neder, he's no longer going to derive benefit from grapes or olives. So the Gemara says they may not have grapes, they may not have olives. You know what they can have? They can have wine and they can have oil, which emerge from these products. Now, how could that be? Isn't the grape and the olive contained in them is wine and oil? So he says over here, it must mean that which we're allowed, that person is allowed to eat that which emerges from them, the liquid that emerges from them, when they made the statement that they don't want to have derived benefit from them, particularly for the fruit itself, their the framework, their intent, their knowledge, their thinking is only at that time, is only on that item itself. And he also makes a distinction. If a person, for example, says konam zetim ve'anavim elu, it takes like a basket of grapes and olives. He says these particular grapes and olives, I will never have or derive benefit from them. And in that case, he can't even have the oil or the wine or the grape juice that comes out of them, because it's a very particular, very deep sense of disconnecting himself from anything that comes of that. We could look at the wording, you could look at the Gemara over there to see the distinction. However, for our case, when a person makes a vow or makes a statement and has a sense of prohibition over an item, we have to see what their intent was. If the intent was on this particular item, it stays there and it's not extended beyond that item. And therefore, if we look again, when a person says, I don't want grapes anymore, I will never have grapes in my life, they're still allowed to have grape juice or wine because they're limiting themselves to the product itself. The same thing is in our sages. When our sages said you may not have matzah on the eve of Pesach, they only had the intention for matzah. And why? Because you want to have the taste and you want to savor and you want to have an appetite for the matzah that you're going to eat at the seder itself in the night and the evening. And so the extension or the extent of the prohibition is only for the matzah that you use to have the mitzvah of Pesach in the night. What kind of matzah is that? Regular baked matzah. Tastes like matzah. And therefore, if you take that matzah and you change it and you manipulate it and you take it, you bake it, you fry it, you deep fry it, you change the taste completely. So even though originally there was a matzah that I am not allowed to eat on the eve of Pesach, but it changed. The enactment or the prohibition, not eating a matzah on the eve of Pesach, is only a regular, normal taste matzah that you would then eat on the eve of Pesach. But ask yourself a question. Are you allowed to take a matzah, deep fry it or cook it and bring it to your Pesach Seder and eat it on Pesach and eat it with the ma'or and eat it with the afikomin and eat it with everything? No. It has to be a regular matzah with regular normalized taste and not manipulated matzah or fried or baked. And therefore, if I can't use it for Pesach night, then our sages, when they said you're not allowed to have it on the eve of Pesach earlier in the day, they had no intention. They had no intent for that at all. And therefore, it says, Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, you're allowed to eat baked and or fried matzah on the eve of Pesach. And then he also comes back to the Rabbi David, which originally we brought, that his whole idea was motivated or instigated by the understanding of the Torah, which the Torah said, hey, we have a problem, you can't eat bread, you can't eat matzah, so you can only eat matzah shira, which is sweet, or egg matzah. And that's how the Rabbi David said that that means that the Torah, that which he didn't mention, that you're allowed to eat baked matzah, he also agrees that you're not allowed to eat baked matzah. Said the Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, that's not written explicitly. He didn't write that. And according to the Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, he believes that even the Torah himself agrees and would permit us to eat baked and or fried matzah on the eve of Pesach. And therefore, to conclude, what do we do this year? This year we have, and it's the next time we're gonna face this occurrence, this issue is going to be in about 20 years from now. So now in the year 2025, 575, what do you do this year? The eve of Pesach falls on Shabbat. How do you do? What do you do? Shabbat de dos panes. So either you take dos panes, you take two pita, two bread early in the morning, you pray early in the morning. Make sure you get home and have enough time to eat your bread and finish wherever you are. Look at the times, wherever you live. But here in Seattle, for example, it's 10:31 a.m. That's the last time that you could eat chametz. You got to get rid of that chametz. Well, you got to finish eating chametz. Make sure you clean your teeth if you're going to be eating chametz. That's one suggestion. Another suggestion that, as we said, by the Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, and by the way, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef also brings it in his book, Chazon Ovadia, and in Shuti Chavedat, he brings it as a suggestion also to have your Shabbat morning meal on baked or fried matzah, and he rules, and like the Rabbi Moshe Yidaber, like our Rabbi here, and he holds by his opinion as well. So that's what we do in the morning. What do you do for Suda Shlishit? First of all, you have an issue because Suda Shlishit, you can't have Suda Shlishit before the Zman of Mincha, before the time of Mincha. So for example, in Seattle, it's 1:44 p.m. So you have to wait till 1:44 p.m. to have Suda Shlishit. By that time, you're not allowed to have bread. You're not allowed to eat normal bread because already at 10:31 a.m. you're not allowed to eat normal bread. And so what you can do in that time, you could eat either matzah shira, you could eat the sweet matzah or the egg matzah, but you're going to have a lot of that, 216 grams. It's not so simple that at that time, according to the Moshe Yidaber, you could have the baked matzah or the fried matzah, but in technicality, based on what we said, you may. But an easy suggestion is that you just have things that are not bread, not matzah, not anything like that. You have meat, fish, rice, salad, fruits. If you're going to have fruits, maybe better to have fruits from the 7 species that grow in Eretz Yisrael. And that's what you have for Suda Shlishit. I hope you enjoyed. And shalom to everyone. And Chag Pesach Kasher V'Sameach. Pesach Alegre.